amongst each other and out in the world. Amen. It is true what they say. Grief is love with no place to go. When you lose someone or something, you have all these feelings that no longer have a destination. It is true what they say. Grief is love with no place to go. When you lose someone or something, you have all these feelings that no longer have a destination. This is a quote from Fred Gutenberg, a parent of one of the victims of the Parkland shootings so many years ago. It is an amazing thing to think about this idea of grief being love with no place to go. I love that imagery, and as someone who works in the field of grief, who is steeped in other people's grief every day, I witness this day in and day out, that feeling of being on track, knowing your destination, knowing where you are going, and suddenly the train has derailed. And it is not so much that the train has crashed and stopped, but it is this train has gone rogue and you have no idea where you are going, what destination is in mind, and where you might end up. It almost can feel like you are on a speeding train with no stopping point. This passage, let's be honest, it sounds kind of like what you would find on a Hallmark card. You have probably heard this passage or parts of it many, many times. It is a beautiful passage, but it is a passage that is actually steeped in grief, or what we call anticipatory grief. It is a little difficult to figure out the context of this passage because we find ourselves right before this. It is Passover. Jesus has gathered with his disciples for the Passover meal. This is the famous scene where Jesus takes his disciples and has them sit before them, and he washes their feet, and you have that dialogue between him and Peter where Peter says, "Don't wash my feet, I'm unworthy." And Jesus says, it is about loving and being like a slave to the least of these. And then you have overeager Peter saying, "Well, then just wash all of me, Jesus." Jesus is like, no, just the feet. Just the feet, Peter. And then you have this meal where we don't have in John the description of communion that we do in the other Gospels, but we do have this conversation that Jesus has with them about one will betray him, one will deny him, and then there's this tiny little line that says, and then they leave. And we get about 3 chapters worth of Jesus talking about all of these different things, like the passage we have today. And suddenly, after these 3 chapters, we end up in the garden where Jesus is praying and is then arrested. But it never says, is he saying this on the way to the garden? Did he say this when they showed up at the garden? Are they standing outside of the house after their Passover meal and he just decides to have, I don't know, like an hour-long speech with his buddies? This has been bothering me, if you haven't I can tell. But we have this long, long speech that Jesus has where he's laying a foundation for them of what is necessary to get them through what is about to happen. And literally what is about to happen right when they show up in the garden and he is arrested. It shines a different light on this passage. And my computer just decided to turn off. So 1 second. Oh, we'll do this from memory. So this passage, this idea of abiding in God's love, this idea of following Christ's commandment to love one another. This is all steeped in this idea and knowledge that Jesus knows that he is about to be arrested and tried, hung on the cross to die. There is an urgency in this love. There are three important things I want you to see when we read this passage. The first one is this idea that Jesus brings forth in the beginning when he says, "Abide in my love." If you read the part of chapter 15 right before this passage, it's Jesus talking about being the vine, being grafted into the vine, and how we, as the people of God, have been grafted into the very nature of God and Christ. So when he says, "Abide in my love," we should have this image in our minds of being these branches that have literally formed into the very essence of who God is. This is one of the most important things and the most radical things that Jesus is saying, knowing in hindsight that they are going to go through some really, really difficult next couple of days. This idea of grief and love having no destination, Jesus is saying the destination is right here. It is in me. Abide in my love. You might not have an actual location or an actual idea of what tomorrow is going to look like, but you can know and be certain that the destination of your hearts, of your spirits, is in my love. When you do not know what is going on, when you do not know where to go or what direction your life is heading, you at least know where I am and where my love is. So this idea of grounding ourselves in the love of God, grounding ourselves in the very nature of who God is. And then he goes on to this other part that honestly for myself, I've always been kind of a independent kid, which basically means I never really liked authority growing up or people telling me what to do. I was always very good at sort of following the rules just enough that I could find the loophole where I wasn't technically breaking the rules, but you didn't say I couldn't, do X, Y, and Z. So when you hear Jesus say, "You are my friend," oh, that's lovely. I feel all warm and fuzzy inside. And then he says, "You are my friend if you do what I command you." Like, whoa, 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 buddy. I don't want you bossing me around. And we can think, okay, commandments, what exactly is he asking us to do? Are these the 10 commandments? Is this the, book of Leviticus? Are we talking about the Jewish laws? But what Jesus is talking about in this particular passage is he is talking about the greatest commandment. He lays it out for us. The greatest commandment is to love God and to love each other. It says, "You are my friend if you do what I command, if you follow my commandments." What Jesus is asking of us, what is the most important thing? What is the one thing that we can sum up the entire Bible and scriptures and history of the Jewish people and Christians of today is this idea to love God and to love our neighbor as ourselves. That's Matthew's interpretation, but in John's, it's to love one another and to love God. Same difference. That's it. That's what matters. And so it's not just abiding in God's love, but it is what happens, the fruit. And you hear about that fruit even at the end of this passage. What is a result of abiding in God's love is to love one another. He goes on to say, this is a different relationship. This is a friendship. This isn't me, the master, you, the slave, and I'm telling you what to do. And in my heart of hearts, I'm like, oh, thank God. This is a relationship. If you have ever been in a really sticky situation in your life, whether it is losing a loved one, losing a job, losing some precious item or thing that was important to you, if you have found yourself dealing with health issues or financial issues, fill in the blank. It is almost impossible to get through tough times alone. You need a village. You know, they say when disaster or tragedy happens, what is the sort of one thing you should know to do? Find the helpers. Find the helpers. Jesus knew. He knew not only do you need to abide in my love and what I've taught you, but you need to abide in each other. Because I'm going to be gone, dead for a few days. And eventually I'm going to be gone. You need each other. And what I have seen, whether in pastoral ministry, whether in hospice, whether in my own life, is we can be really good at being there for each other when things are tough and bad, but it's very easy to turn on each other when some time has passed. I have had the privilege, I say, of pastoring in Connecticut in Newtown when the Sandy Hook shooting happened. And I saw the amazing way that community came together. I used to have a bumper sticker on my old car that they had passed out around town, and it says, "We are Newtown, we choose love." And that was the motto of the community. But with communities like that, as time passes, there were a lot of money donations. There was a lot of physical donations that were brought into that community. And it can be very easy for folks to lose sight of what it is to be in community with one another and to start arguing and battling over things like money and donations and what to do with them. It's a very common thing. It can be very easy to start pointing fingers and to say, whose fault is this? Who should have done something? Shoulda, woulda, coulda. It can be very easy when we're in our own grief and we are having a really hard time dealing with the strong emotions pulling at us to, instead of dealing with our own stuff, to put our own stuff onto those around us. Have you ever heard the saying that you lash out to those you love the most? Which is always hard when you're the one being lashed out to. Like, I get that you love me, especially as a parent. Have you ever heard that? Your kids go to school and they get, it's a stressful day, they're really tired, and then they come home and they're just crazy, like ridiculous human beings who nobody else has had this experience. Okay, I'm like, I was told I'm not the only one. And you read the research and the psychologists say, oh, it's because they feel safe in your home and they know that you love them and they can just let their full vulnerable selves shine through. And sometimes my wife and I go, should we love them less? Because their vulnerable selves is like, they will not stop screaming at us. Of course, we're not going to love them less. But we have to be careful. Because what is most important is not just to look for the helpers, but to be helpers for one another, to love one another. And then we have that verse, the very famous verse, I think, of this whole passage. It says, there is no greater love than this, that one shall lay down their life for a friend. I wrestle with that passage. There's not that many people in my life who I would lay down my life for. And I even went to the Greek here. I was like, what does the Greek word actually mean here in this phrase, laying down one's life? And we can read this as literally putting our life on the line for those we love. It also can be seen as kneeling before someone, laying prostrate before them. It can be also interpreted as laying down one's life is just saying, I stay put. I am laying this down. It shall not be moved. I don't know if you have been looking at the news at all lately, But there are hundreds of protests happening right now on college campuses. And I have witnessed in watching, the TikTok videos, the news programs, hearing these stories, professors who are literally laying down their lives, using their bodies as a shield to protect the students who are protesting from the police. We can take this literally and we can take it figuratively, but the point is this love that Jesus is calling us into is a radical love. Cornell West, and I'm not going to quote this perfectly because my computer shut off, but said that love in action is justice, is seeking justice. To love one another, to abide in God's love, is to lay down our life for one another, is to say, your problem is my problem. Your hunger is my hunger. Your injustices are my injustices. That we are connected and that we can stand up for each other and are called to do so. It might not be being on a college campus protesting the genocide in Gaza, but it could be in that case sending food or money or calling legislators. From my own experiences with working in trauma, I have a very hard time being at physical protests. That's just part of my journey and, the PTSD that I got from working with Sandy Hook and stuff. But I can do other things. I can get the word out. I can repost people's clips in social media that get the word out. I can, like I said, call legislators, have conversations with folks. We can even pray. We should pray. There is always something we can do. This is not a Hallmark card. This call to love is a radical call to stand with each other when times are hard. To stand with each other in such a way that we invest in one another. We got skin in the game. We would do whatever it takes to see our loved ones thrive once again. Amen. What are we doing?